The Okeke mansion stood like a palace on the outskirts of Lagos, surrounded by high walls, guarded by cameras, and lit up by golden lights at night. From the outside, it was a symbol of success and luxury, but inside it was a world of silence. Mrs. Adana Okeke, the mistress of the house, sat by the tall glass window in her grand living room, staring at the empty driveway. She was 52, still elegant, her hair always neatly styled, her clothes always expensive, but her eyes carried the weight of solitude. Her husband, Chief Obiora Okeke, had died 10 years earlier in a sudden heart attack. They had built everything together, the companies, the estates, the reputation. His absence left a hole no diamond could fill. Their only son, Emeka, had moved abroad for studies and stayed there, preferring his freedom to his mother's strict guidance. He called only on birthdays and public holidays, and even then, the conversations were short, formal, and strained. The mansion had more than 20 rooms, yet none were ever filled. The laughter of visitors was rare, and the sound of family dinners had long faded. Even when her staff moved about, maids cleaning, guards at their posts, the cook preparing meals, the house still felt hollow. Everyone respected her, but no one drew near enough to touch her loneliness. At night, when the city outside roared with traffic and nightlife, Adana found herself at her grand piano. She had once played duets with her husband there. Now, she ran her fingers over the keys, not pressing down, just feeling the smoothness of ivory as memories threatened to break her heart. It was during those quiet hours that she thought most about trust. Her business partners smiled at her, but whispered behind her back. The so-called friends who once came for parties now only appeared when they needed favors. Even her extended family treated her more like a bank than a sister or aunt. Her only genuine human interaction came during car rides with her driver, Chaik. He was young, perhaps in his late 20s, and though he was quiet, Adana often spoke to him about the weather, about Lagos traffic, sometimes even about her late husband's habits. She liked the way he listened, even if he didn't always respond. In a strange way, the boy's presence filled a small gap in her empty life. That night, as she walked up the grand staircase to her master bedroom, the silence pressed against her ears like a heavy weight. She paused halfway, looking around the house. The marble floors gleamed, the chandeliers sparkled, the air smelled faintly of roses from the indoor garden, but none of it mattered. Her voice echoed softly in the emptiness as she whispered to herself, "Riches mean nothing when there is no one to share them with." And upstairs, in a smaller servant's room, Chaik sat on his bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind already beginning to form dark thoughts. Chaik Naji was 26 tall, with a lean frame and sharp eyes that always seemed to be hiding something. To outsiders, he looked like a hard-working young man who had landed a respectable job as the driver of one of the richest widows in Lagos. But behind that neat uniform and polite, "Yes, madam," his world was crumbling. Chaik had grown up in the crowded streets of Ajigunle, where poverty was the law of life. His father, a struggle mechanic, had died when Chaik was just 12. His mother worked as a petty trader, selling fruits by the roadside until her health began to fail. Chaik was the firstborn, the one everyone looked to for help. When he got the job at Madame Adana's mansion, he thought his prayers had been answered. The pay was good compared to his previous hustles, and for the first time, he could send money home regularly. But his weakness was gambling. It started harmlessly. Weekend bets on football matches with friends, small amounts he could afford to lose. But as weeks passed, the thrill of winning drew him deeper. He borrowed money, convinced that the next game would pay it back. Instead, he sank further into debt. By the time he realized, he owed almost 2 million naira to ruthless street loan sharks. The kind of men who didn't take excuses, only blood. Every night he got threatening calls. Sometimes strange men lingered near his mother's stall, warning her in cryptic words. Chaik's chest tightened every time he thought of what might happen if he didn't pay up soon. Driving Madame Adana every day was like torture. He watched her wear clothes worth more than he earned in a year. He saw her diamond bracelets sparkle under the sun, her handbags imported from Paris, her perfumes that cost as much as his rent. She had so much, too much, while he was drowning. Yet she was kind to him. That was the part that gnawed at him most. Sometimes she asked if he had eaten. Once, when he looked pale, she had stopped by a roadside restaurant and bought him a plate of jollof rice with chicken. "Chike, you're too thin," she had said, smiling warmly. "You must take care of yourself. You're still young." That memory should have softened him, but desperation hardens hearts. Each time she treated him like a son, the voice in his head whispered, "She has the wealth that can save you. All you need is one chance, one strike. She will recover. But you may not live another month if you don't act." At night, in his tiny servant's room at the mansion, Chike lay awake. He stared at the cracked ceiling, his heart racing, his mind calculating. His debts, the threats, the ticking clock of danger, all of it pressed on him until his breath came in short gasps. It was there in that darkness that the idea was born, not fully formed, but dangerous. A whisper that promised salvation. What if you took her? He shut his eyes, but the thought would not leave. And slowly, night after night, it began to grow. One evening, after Dan attended charity gala, Chike drove her home. The night was quiet, the road dark and empty. Suddenly, the car jerked to a stop. "What happened?" she asked, a little alarmed. "Engine trouble, madam," Chike replied calmly, stepping out. Before she could reach for her phone, two masked men burst from the shadows. Rough hands pulled her out of the car. She screamed, struggling, but they overpowered her. And then her heart shattered when she heard the familiar voice of her driver giving the orders. "Quick, move her." Chike barked. Betrayal cut deep in the ropes that tied her wrists. Adana was thrown into a small, dirty room with a single weak bulb hanging from the ceiling. For the first time in her life, she felt powerless. Her expensive jewelry was ripped off her fingers, her designer dress torn at the hem. Days turned into nights. She was fed poorly, her body weakening. Her kidnappers contacted her son in London, demanding a huge ransom. But Emeka, bitter at his mother for years of coldness and control, hesitated. Chike delivered her food daily. She would stare at him with eyes full of sorrow. "Chike, why are you doing this to me?" she whispered. "I trusted you. I treated you like my own child." His jaw tightened. He turned away without answering. One night, Adana broke down completely. Alone in that filthy room, she whispered prayers she hadn't said in years. Tears soaked her face as she thought of her late husband, her distant son, and the emptiness of her wealth. When Chike entered to drop her meal, she reached for his arm with trembling hands. "Do you know what it means to be truly alone, Chike? That's my life. I would have given you anything if you had just asked." For the first time, guilt hit him like a heavy stone. He looked at her fragile face, at the woman who had once bought him food when he had nothing. His chest tightened, but he buried the feeling. It's too late. On the fourth night, one of the accomplices made a grave error. He stole Adana's credit card and used it to buy alcohol in a nearby bar. That single purchase alerted the police. Meanwhile, Emeka, after much persuasion, finally agreed to pay part of the ransom. But by then, the police had already tracked the criminals. At dawn, sirens wailed in the distance. Gunshots rang out as officers stormed the hideout. Adana was rescued, trembling and weak, but alive. Chike was dragged out in handcuffs, his head bowed. Back in her mansion, Adana was safe but scarred. Her son flew in days later, but the distance between them remained. She walked through her vast home, lonelier than ever. Money had not saved her. Kindness had betrayed her. Trust had destroyed her. And in his cold prison cell, Chike replayed her words every night. "I would have given you anything if you had just asked." The wealth he had sought slipped through his fingers, and all he was left with